Welcome everyone to our next Facebook Parent Talk. I'm Caitlin Tollison, licensed clinical social worker. I serve as the Vice President of Mental Health Supports for the organization. And so again, if you are joining us for the first time, sorry if this is your third viewing with us this year on these different videos. A little bit about what I do. I lead our team of therapists that offer direct practice counseling services in our schools right now, like most everybody else in the US and honestly probably the world. We're doing all those services virtually, which means that we are talking to our parents, to our students via teletherapy and over the phone, which means that we are getting some great information from our parents, and I would even venture to say maybe a lot of real talk, even more than maybe we get through the year, because our lives are different now. And so things that again, you wouldn't normally have to face on a daily basis, you're facing. And so I know as I've talked to different parents and I've heard from my staff and just dealing with parents in general, in working, when you work with students and you're helping the parents understand how to parent well, or how to work with a student who is facing a mental health challenge, you may have to communicate differently. And I would say that now, because all of our lives are different and through this pandemic, and you may be stuck, we'll say, at home with your kids, and maybe they're getting on your nerves, or maybe their emotion and their stuckness, if you will, in their survival brain is causing you to get stuck in your survival brain. And so we just have a vicious cycle going on. All of those things can make communication really hard, especially when you have students maybe asking you school questions that you don't understand, or questions that, especially if you have a younger kid, that they've never experienced anything like this before, and so maybe they're considering the world in a whole new light, and this pandemic is really changing their worldview, and so they may be asking you some really difficult questions right now. So I want to say again, like all of our talks, this is not a replacement for therapy. If you or your student or another family member is facing a mental health challenge, disorder, crisis, that you need to seek individual treatment. There are many different options for teletherapy right now. I know that's what we're doing with our students, like I said, and again, there's lots of different agencies that are offering resources for counseling right now. This is a hard time. There's no shame. I know there's a huge negative mental health stigma in our world and society, and don't buy into that lie. It's okay to ask for help. And I know I'm biased because I'm a therapist, but it is okay to ask for help, especially now when you're facing things like maybe unemployment, just the difficulty of balancing work life if you still are employed through this, balancing that with your kiddos. There's lots of different challenges and stresses put on you. Even if it wasn't that, like we weren't in the situation that we're in now, it's okay to ask for help. So I want to say that, especially if you're having thoughts of killing yourself or hurting yourself in a different way, or killing or hurting someone else, those thoughts are never normal. And so we need to take care of them. Those are serious. We need to take them seriously every time. So please seek help. Please, in an emergency situation, especially, seek emergency services. So, communication, that's what I think that may be beneficial for a lot of our parents to hear right now, and knowing, how in the world do I talk to my kids about things that I may not have even reconciled in my mind. I may be feeling some anger or anxiety, different things related to what's going on in the world right now. If you spend time on social media, maybe you have lots of different influences coming in with differences of opinions. Not just now, but all the time. Our kids are viewing those things too. And so because they're home with you more right now, they may be asking you some really tough questions. But after the pandemic is over, they will still ask you hard questions. If they're not already, then they will. So that's just part of being a parent or being around kids. If you're not a parent, you're joining us maybe as a teacher or another worker with kids, you work with them in some capacity. They ask you hard questions. They're trying to figure out the world around them, and hard questions are good. That means that they're thinking and learning, and so we want to encourage those things. But as parents, it may be a little daunting to have a child ask you a really hard question that you don't know the answer to, or that is maybe has lots of other implications. So I thought that, again, that this might be beneficial. Like everything we do, we want to make sure that it's beneficial to you. So I hope that you find that it is. So first of all, like anything that I do with my students, families, we need to set a baseline. So what is communication? So communication is something that we are doing right now. You're listening to me talk about communication, and you're receiving that message. You're interpreting it however you are. You're having your own thoughts and feelings surrounding what I'm talking about, and that's affecting you. If you put a comment on this video, or maybe you talk to somebody else about the video, your conversation, you're communicating. But even more than that, our communication, whether it's verbal, electronic, I will say that we're going to talk much more about like verbal communication today, but your communication is much more than just your verbal communication. We have to take into account our nonverbal communication styles as well, and the things that go into that. You say a lot more than whenever you're communicating. You say a lot more than what your words, the words that you're forming, if that makes sense. So things like your body language, your tone of voice, the volume of your voice, your facial expressions, your posture. There's so much more that goes into things that we call nonverbal communication. And that is also sending a message to your listener, viewer, partner, whoever is on the opposite end of the receiving end. How they respond to you then is a continuation on that communication highway, if you will. So your kids are not exempt from that. So they are receiving different messages, different forms of communication every single day, and they're learning from those. One like a major influencer, I don't like to make always or like never statements when I can help it, because they almost never apply. But you are probably the most influential educator, if you will. Your kids learn from you as a primary caregiver than they probably do from anyone else. So, and that's not meant to put undue pressure on you in any way. It's good information to have to keep ourselves as parents, as guardians, as fill in the blank, being a caretaker of children. You have huge power in their lives, and what you communicate and how you communicate matters. So all that to say, when we take this huge crucial thing that is communication and pair it with something where a lot of us are stuck in the downstairs part of our brain, where we're reacting out of the emotional center, our limbic system, our amygdala, that can make communication really hard. So, and not just whenever we're living in a state of crisis. Whenever someone asks you a question, maybe it's in a subject that is just uncomfortable for you to talk about in general, you're feeling those emotions, and so communicating then and like making your thoughts and your words very rational and out of your prefrontal cortex can be difficult too. So, if I haven't convinced you already, it's really important to communicate well. And I'm sure you know this, but just in case you've never thought about it before, maybe. But there's importance in communication more than just getting your message across with your words. That again, this is where that nonverbal communication is going to come into play, that you're sending a message, whether you mean to or not, by how you are saying your words, how your body looks when you're saying your words. If that doesn't make sense to you, if I have a frown on my face and maybe I'm crossing my arms and I say, I'm really happy right now, are you going to believe me? Probably not. Or maybe you're going to hear, oh, there's sarcasm in her voice, or maybe even you're picking up on some disgust, right? And so even though my words are, I'm really happy right now, that's not how I said it. So my words and my verbal and my nonverbals are sending mixed messages, right? So we can do this without meaning to as well. So maybe you're communicating to your child, but your day in Zoom meetings, or maybe it's the end of the day and you're just tired, you have a lot of stress on you, or you're dealing with some depression or anxiety, and so that's taking a toll on you. And so your response maybe is sending a mixed message from what your words are. So your nonverbals again are not communicating clearly what you mean to get across. So we have to recognize that and also reconcile that. Because our communication, it does more than just the messages, even though that's extremely important. That's why we communicate, is to let someone else know what we're thinking, what we're feeling, what we need. Communication comes to us in all kinds of different ways, and it's sending us messages, and we do the same thing. But even more than that, our communication can build or destroy relationships. So when we are talking about you as a parent, as a caretaker, a guardian, because you are, if not the most influential person, a communicator, message in a child's life, we need to make sure that what we're communicating is good and is beneficial and is teaching our students things that we want them to learn. So what I mean by that is that we have a great opportunity through our communication, through our message, to be modeling behavior and expectations. We are reinforcing habits, for better or for worse, whenever we are talking with our kids. So, or again, talking verbally or non-verbally, whenever we're sending those messages and communicating with them. So all that to say, hopefully I've convinced you, if you weren't already there, that this is something important that we need to think about. And I'll mention too that you're not always going to have good days. And so there are going to be times when, even though you realize you're sold that communication is important and that it has a lasting impact, you aren't always going to be your best all the time. And that's okay, because even though communication can, and maybe destroys too strong of a word, but at least harm relationships, it also has the opportunity to repair those relationships too, and to have that connection and to rebuild that trust. And even though that can be difficult, it happens. We're humans, we're not perfect. And so what an even better message may come across if we can own up to the times that we're not perfect, which, if you're anything like me, is all the time, every single day. And what kind of message are we sending to our kids if we're able to say, you know what, I messed up, I didn't communicate that well, or that came across not the way that I intended, or maybe I did intend it and that was a wrong intention at this time. What an awesome message it is sending them for personal accountability and responsibility, and even empathy too. So again, hopefully you're convinced of that. But how do we do this? So we've already talked about how important our nonverbal communication is. So think about, whenever your kids are asking you those hard questions, how do you look? if you know that there's a topic or, really topic, especially that makes you uncomfortable, or maybe it's a scenario, like maybe right now you're just more irritable and on edge during this time when your life may be turned upside down. Know that about yourself. That means that you have to be really emotionally intelligent and have a lot of good self-awareness in order to manage those emotions that you're facing. Because your kid asking you questions may be contributing to your stress, but I would venture to say it is most likely not all of your stress, and their questions are valid and important, and their life, like we want to communicate to them that they matter to us, that we care about what they're saying, that their words are important. So think about that and kind of prepare yourself. You may take the opportunity to have conversations with yourself in preparation, as if your child was asking. So like when we do positive self-talk, practice conversations with yourself that if my kid asks me, I don't know, why can't we go outside right now? Why am I not allowed to go to the store with you? Why can we not go visit grandma and grandpa? Whatever it is, that may be really hard. Even though maybe those aren't hard questions to you, but I would guess that right now, again, with all of our other stresses that are coming into our lives right now, maybe those questions are difficult for you. So we're going to go with those. So practice though answering those questions in a way that you can be proud of, and in different situations. So I'm remembering back to like my childhood, and we as kids, and I'm sure you probably did this as a kid as well, what pushes your parents' buttons. And I could tell just by a look on my mom's face when I was on her nerves, when I was pushing it too far, and honestly too, just when she had a bad day. And so just without her saying something, I can tell all those things by her nonverbals. And so put yourself in that place. So when you're in a point of stress, when you are at a point of maybe fear, maybe you're experiencing a lot of that right now, and so you are, again, more irritable or on edge, put yourself in that place, because it's not your kid's fault. And even if it were, for the reason why you're irritable or on edge, is that really what you want to communicate to your child? That because I'm feeling some kind of way, it's okay for me to respond to you, however, and not really take account for your feelings or really the message that I'm communicating to you. I would venture to say that no parent wants to teach their kid to do that. And so we need to make sure that we're modeling the type of behavior and the type of communication that we want our kids to be teaching to their kids and to their friends and whoever they come into contact with. So some other things that you can do whenever your kids are asking really difficult questions is make sure that you have good eye contact with them, because this is going to show them that you're listening. I know it's really, really, really tempting to answer a text message whenever it comes in, or maybe you were in the middle of a video on Facebook and you really want to finish it, but your child is asking you a question. Instead of giving them a half answer or trying to multitask, which doesn't always work well for us, give them your full attention. It's okay as the parent to say, I can't answer that right now, or let me have 1 minute, or I'm almost finished with this, and you can come back, but make sure you return to that. So you are communicating again to your child by following through on your promise that you're going to return to that conversation, that they're important and that their words matter to you, which is going to go a really long way with them. So maintain that eye contact whenever you're talking to them, and even turning towards them whenever you're talking. So maybe you're cooking, or you are, I don't know, you're changing your baby's diaper, and your toddler or your elementary school kid or whoever is asking you a question. If you can, face them, and I know, like, I know that this isn't going to be possible all the time, but as much effort as you can to show them that you're listening to them and that they matter is going to help your message and your communication to your kids, whatever that message needs to be. So, you can also get on their level. So they're asking you something really hard, or maybe they're in a moment where they're really afraid or upset. If you have a small kid, get on your knees and talk to them to where you guys are eye to eye. That's really, really impactful for students, especially our little bitties. Pay attention. So we know the things. It's easy to know if someone is listening to you or if they are not listening to you. So make sure that you're genuinely listening to them. In terms of answering them, because I know kids ask things that they're either not ready to have the answer to, or that it would not benefit them to have the answer to. That's okay. You as the parent get to determine whether your child is or isn't ready for a completely true answer to what they're asking. But we consider this, we can give them, we can still give them a reassuring message, even if they're not able to handle the real answer to the question they're asking. And that might be kind of confusing for some of you. And again, that's okay. So allow me to clarify. So, our kids may ask, so immediately, and I know this isn't maybe immediately applicable to everyone's situation, but I used to do a class with divorced or separated parents that were learning to co-parent, and so I'll take an example from there that I thought was really good. So your kids may ask, "Hey, why don't mommy and daddy live together anymore? Like, what's going on with that?" and want to know more about that. So you may have really hard questions surrounding the pandemic as well. And so I'm talking about questions on that level. They may not be ready or may not need. It may not be helpful at all for them to hear the real reason for what all that's going on. And so you have to make the determination really quickly and act quickly on your thinking feet, if you will, to decide how you're going to respond. So even past, like, let's say we have our tone, we're making eye contact, we're on their level, that still doesn't help us with the actual words that we're going to say. So I would challenge you guys to do a couple of things. One of them that is important, and this is really helpful whenever your kid is, maybe they're not asking a hard question, but they're throwing a tantrum. And so you are now going into a place where maybe you're angry, or maybe you're in public and you're embarrassed or something. And so you are now reacting emotionally because it's having an effect on you. Excuse me. Try and focus focus on what they're saying, but look at the message behind the message. And so what I mean by that is look at what they're meaning to communicate, even if they're not using those words. So this is especially important for our little ones because they don't have the vocabulary that they may need to communicate how they're feeling in that moment. And so as a parent, you kind of have to be a detective, right? And figure out, okay, what are you meaning? And you can do that by asking questions. And so if you're not sure what your child is meaning by the question that they're asking, so maybe they've asked you, why am I not allowed to play with my friends at school? I haven't seen them in a really long time and I miss them, and maybe they're mad and they're yelling at you. Instead of telling them, because you're going to die, like that's why we can't go outside, and inspiring a lot of fear and everything, we can hear that maybe their feeling behind their message is that they're frustrated and they're confused, or maybe even they're scared. This isn't real life right now to them. Like this doesn't look at all like their real life that they're used to. And so they're wanting answers, but giving them the whole truth about what everything that's going on and maybe all of the dangers surrounding the coronavirus and things like that may not be beneficial to them, especially if they're little. So even if they're asking that question, we can ask some clarifying questions of, well, with that, I'm drawing a blank, but we can ask them things that are addressing the feeling. And so instead of immediately answering in a way that maybe doesn't care so much for their emotion, we can say something that does concern their emotion instead. So we can say things like, it sounds like what's going on in the world right now may be a little scary. Would you like to talk about that? So say another example, maybe, well, I'll use this one. So I have a sister that has a 2-year-old, and exactly the same thing. She was upset because she wasn't allowed to go outside and play with the neighbors. And my sister was explaining to her, I know that that's upsetting to you, but we're not going to do that right now. We need to find something else inside to play with. And her daughter said to her instead, well, Mommy, I'm mad. I don't love you anymore. And I happened to be on the phone with her while that was happening, and heard my sister say, that's not how we talk to one another. And anyway, she had that parenting moment. And when it was over, her daughter went and she was coloring, or I don't know, she was doing something else. And she said to me, she's like, wow, that really hurt my feelings. And she was even evaluating her emotions from the message that was communicated to her. And so all of that to say, that example to say that our kids are experiencing these emotions and they're communicating to you more often out of their emotional brain. And so whenever they are heightened, we need to make sure that we're not also meeting their emotional level, because especially like when they're angry. So when a kiddo is angry and they just keep increasing in escalation, we don't need to make sure we're escalating as well, because our kids are going to one-up us every time. Okay, because they don't have as much ability or just years in knowing how to manage their emotions, how to regulate themselves, that we as adults do. So we have to make sure that we stay calm, cool, and collected, and use those quick coping skills. Maybe take a couple of deep breaths. If you can, maybe exit, go take a time out if you're really, really upset, and then come back and address the situation of, hey, by your tone of voice, or maybe by your frown or your clenched fist, it seems like you are angry right now. I feel angry too. Whenever I'm angry, I like to do X, Y, and Z, right? And so we're addressing what they're feeling, because that may be really what they're needing right now, instead of, again, like a full answer. If your kid maybe they truly are just asking like, hey, this is a confusing time and what's going on? They're coming to you because they trust you. And so we want to make sure that the answer that you're giving is reassuring and is not promising something, one, that may not happen, and isn't dismissive either. So maybe if they're saying, hey, we'll go with the same example, why can't I go outside and play with my friends? Instead of saying, well, just don't worry about it, where that may be really dismissive, and communicating to them that your question isn't worth my time, or you aren't worth my time, even though that may not be what you're meaning to communicate. That those type of responses, even though they're easy and it may squash the question right then, especially if you're not prepared to answer, it may be doing more long-term damage to your student without even meaning to. So, and even instead of, let's see, like we just can't, another dismissive one, doesn't really answer their question if they're actually asking you. So there may be some things that we can do to reassure our kids during this time, even if they, again, don't need that whole truth in your communication. We can still be really caring and sensitive to what they're asking, and treating them with respect. When we want our kids to respect us, we have to make sure that we're returning that same respect to them. So even if it may be on a different level. But anyway, moving on. So sometimes we can give them answers. So maybe we could say something to the effect of, and again, maybe this is going to sound really cheesy and corny to you, but this is just an example. So put it in your own words. You know your kids best, but what would be the harm maybe in saying, there's a virus right now, and sometimes things like that can be in our world. So we're going to stay inside to make sure that we can be as safe and healthy as possible. And I know that's really hard. So would it be helpful if we found an activity to do together? And again, only add the activity and doing something together part if that's actually possible. Especially if you have a little kid, their world is instant, is right now. And so if you make that promise, they're going to want to do it right now, right? It may be that they're just mad that they can't do what they want to do. And so maybe it's a good time to set some boundaries with them and have them understand that, hey, I love you. And right now we need to stay inside, and here are some options of things that we can do inside, or maybe you can do inside, or whatever is manageable for you to either help them with at that time or to have them do independently at that time. But we're not making promises. So like when I say making promises, saying, oh, it'll all be fine, just don't worry about it. Well, one, unfortunately right now, you don't know if everything will be just fine. It may not be. This may be maybe just fine to them, is that everything's going to be back to normal tomorrow. And so even though that isn't what you meant, or even, hopefully this isn't going to happen, but by looking at the rest of the world, we know that there's lots of deaths caused by this, to especially immunocompromised or older generation. And so you may have members of your family that this may traumatically and tragically affect. So saying it'll all be all right, we just have to wait, it won't be forever, it'll be fine, they're going to hold on to that. And so even though it may not seem like that big of a deal to answer that way, consider what damage to their trust in you that might do. And could you say something, again, like in my example of saying that, this won't last forever, but you need to trust me on this one, that it's better for us to stay inside because there's a virus right now, and I want to protect you and make sure that you're safe and healthy. And so that means that we're going to spend some more time inside right now. That's giving them some reassuring information, and also will open up a really good door to understanding, or not understanding, but it'll open up a door to exploring whatever emotions that they are experiencing at the time. So because it can, if you're following me at all, it can lead exactly into, are you feeling confused, or are you feeling scared about this time, or maybe you're feeling mad, and also open the door to help them learn some coping or some self-regulation strategies that you use, or maybe that's the activity that you do together when they're asking some hard questions. Maybe that's a great opportunity to say, you know what, whenever I feel this way, it helps me feel better if I listen to a joke and I laugh, or I play a game, or I do a silly dance and have a dance party, something like that, whatever it is that you do, and encouraging that emotional development in them and that ability to self-regulate. So I know that communication, it may not be always that they're asking you a hard question, but maybe they're acting in a way that's inappropriate, that goes against your house rules. And I want to say too that maybe your kid, so again, like my niece saying to my sister, I just don't love you anymore. And she was really mad, and it's not funny. I'm sorry. It just, the fact that she would say that was a little humorous to me, which I'm sure my sister did not appreciate. But your kids will do that, or maybe they are throwing the tantrum, or because they're mad, they're acting mean. what a great opportunity for us to be with them there in that moment and help them understand, I have times where I feel angry too, and this is how I handle it. There are lots of ways to handle this, but one of the things that we can't do is we can't hit others, or we can't throw things across the room. And I understand that's an example maybe of something you would say to a younger kid. To an older one that's maybe throwing a tantrum, maybe your words are something like, hey, man, I get it. I get mad too, but we got to handle it in a different way. So if you want to talk about it, great. Otherwise, I can give you some time to cool off. That is setting a good boundary with them. And all that to say that I'm not saying that through this, if they're throwing a tantrum or they're whatever, doing something that's not appropriate for the roles in your household, that there's no consequences. I'm just saying that if our only message to them during those moments are a lot of, and I mean, I can be guilty of this as well, is, like, just stop, like, get away from me. That's not communicating that I don't like the behavior. It's communicating I don't like you. And even though that's not what we intend, that's what our kids hear a lot of the time. So instead, we want them to understand that, hey, I understand this is hard. It's a hard moment. And our message, our communication to them needs to be not just more positive, but much more focused on what is really at the heart of the matter, which is the difficult feeling, their emotion that they're experiencing. So, whenever they're in those hard moments, that might be something you can try and may alter your communication a little bit. And again, I understand, because I hear this a lot from parents of like, Katie, that's just not realistic. Like, I'm not able to think that quickly. And no, probably initially, if this is something, especially, I hear it a lot with parents with anger, that their kid has embarrassed them or made them mad in some way. We need to remember that anger is like a blanket, and it's often covering up something else underneath. So a lot of times when we, maybe we're expressing or we're presenting in a way of anger, really we're feeling embarrassed or ashamed or sad or scared or something like that. And we're just reacting with anger. And we need to make sure that if our message to our kids is, hey, it's okay to be mad, it's not okay to be mean, that we're not being mean when we're mad. And because we're not perfect, the times when we do fly off the handle or we can't keep our cool, after that moment, coming back to your kiddo and saying, no matter the age, whether they're little or maybe they're 18 living in your house, coming back to them and saying, you know what, I messed up. That's not the way that is going to be best for your life or for my life, to handle anger in that way. And so, I should have done X, Y, and Z to make sure that I was calmed down. Or maybe maybe it wasn't just that you're angry, and so you weren't just communicating by how you were acting. Maybe it was a different situation. But even if you were directing that towards your child and you were really angry at them, because again, let's be honest here, it's going to happen because none of us are perfect, right? And so as we are on this like self-awareness, self-management, emotional intelligence, and identifying those emotions, like as we're on that journey, we are going to have times where we mess up. And so what a message is that to your kid if you're able to come back and say, I messed up. You are modeling behavior that you want them to have, not only when they finally do return back to school at some time, so in the classroom, to their peers, to other adults around them, when they're older and in the workforce, we are modeling the behavior that we want them to display, as well as teaching them that, hey, personal accountability is a thing, and responsibility for your actions, and owning up, because we're people and we're not expected to be perfect, but we are expected to own it when we mess up. So all of that, even though that's not communicated, maybe not even in your nonverbal or verbal communication, but that's the overall message that your kids are going to take away whenever we handle things like that. So we don't need to discount coming back after the fact when we've maybe destroyed, or again, destroyed is a difficult, very extreme word, but whether we've ruptured a relationship or a moment with our kid, and we're coming back in to repair that harm through our communication. So of telling them that wasn't okay, I'll do better next time. And then, because isn't that how we want our kids to respond whenever they mess up? Especially if you're working on your child, working with your child on maybe taking responsibility or something. We need to make sure, or anger too. This comes up a lot in sessions of families that are when they're dealing with an angry child. If we're letting them get us escalated, so we're yelling at them for yelling, we're not teaching them that behavior is unacceptable. What we're teaching them is that behavior is only unacceptable when you're a kid. That when you're an adult, there aren't consequences for that, and you can act however you want, which again isn't true. And so that's a message that we don't need to communicate, because it's not going to set your kiddos up for success. So, yeah, it's difficult. And again, I won't say or pretend that I'm perfect at this at all. Again, like I've already said, I am an imperfect person and I mess up every single day. And so you'll mess up in your communication. But what matters even more is coming back and owning that, and really making sure that you're communicating the message of, I'm a trusted person. Your words are important to me. And we treat each other with respect. There's so many things we want to model and make sure that our kids learn. And so much of that can be done and is done through your communication. Because whether we like it or not, our kids are becoming us. They're watching us and they're listening to us. And so we need to make sure that our communication's on point, both verbally and non-verbally, as much as we can. So again, I hope this was helpful for you. This has been great to talk about communication. And so if you have any questions, feel free to put a comment, or you can go to our website and contact us there to ask a question. Otherwise, have a great day, everyone. And until we see each other again.